Hey, thanks so much, Emily, and thanks everybody for joining this afternoon. So as we get started, the thing that I want you to think about when we're thinking about Virtru is how you can protect your data without having the traditional trade-off between security and convenience, because that is a really important factor to understand as you start introducing data protection technologies on that. Before we jump into the Virtru solution, I want to focus on why our technology is being applied to Office 365 and other environments for our customers. So as we move to cloud systems, one of the considerations now that we're thinking of is we no longer have the traditional perimeter around our environment, the firewalls, if you will, around our mail servers, our file systems as we go through that. We are now uploading these to very secure cloud environments, but our traditional perimeter around security and control no longer exists. We also are sharing more and more data as organizations, whether it be a collaborative environment, whether it be customer data. Ultimately, this comes down to the more we can share with our partners in this environment, the more nimble we can be as businesses. But as we consider data sharing, we also need to consider the attacks that are being put on our systems. We're, as IT professionals, as security professionals, we read and experience whether phishing attempts, spear phishing attempts, data breaches that are inadvertent based off the systems that we have. So with this foundation, we need to consider what are the new requirements for data protection as we move into cloud systems like Office 365, or just in general as attacks grow in our environment. So what this means practically is that when we're sharing information from our systems, whether it be an email, whether it be a file within that, we want to consider how do we share that without losing control. Traditionally, as we share information across data boundaries, across systems that are out of our control, we inherently lose control of that data, of gaining access or environments with that. So knowing who has access at all times and being able to potentially revoke access becomes a very important consideration with that. But another consideration may be more regulatory in nature. So when we choose a cloud provider, there are also considerations on, does that cloud provider potentially have access to our information? This may be very critical for regulatory environments such as export controls or maybe handling criminal justice information. But also we have to consider who our partners, who our customers are choosing as their cloud providers. Are there any data security considerations with that? At the end of the day, we need to protect that data that's most sensitive to us as an organization, whether it be intellectual property, confidential data, or just generally customer sensitive data. When we go into these conversations about data protection, we really start to need to break down what actual data needs additional layers of protection. And this is a very important consideration when discussing how additional layers of protection may be either required or desired within our environments. So to break this down a little bit, we did a survey of various IT and security professionals, line of business leadership, really leadership in IT and security across a varied set of companies across the US. And these are mid to large enterprises, 1,000 enterprises and up, 150 people. And we just surveyed, what types of data do you have in your environment? How would you classify these? And they were really brought down into 3 specific areas. The smallest percentage represented in blue is just data that's not sensitive, 27.4% of data that is just regular communications, meeting planning, logistics, going through that environment within that. But the more interesting was the breakdown of things that were considered either highly regulated or sensitive across that. And this represented upwards of 73% of our data set. So what this means is this is the type of data or elements that we would need to consider applying protections like Virtru to have additional layers of protection above and beyond the traditional approaches that are available today. So when we think about this, almost 73% of data, we also asked, what does this actually look like across your lines of business? And so we broke this down by department as we have this. And what we can see at the top of this is that this is very broad reaching. Everywhere from the traditional executive to HR to finance to legal, the areas that would be either handling the most corporately sensitive data, like the executive team communicating with our boards around M&As or employing or sharing data about strategy that we have. Our human resources as they handle our personal data, whether it be related to our tax records or our benefits information. Finance dealing with payroll as we go through this. But it also is across the board. So think of our R&D, our supply chain, our pieces that are introducing communications with dealing with our roadmap and the environments that we're creating and the products that we're creating. So these are the types of use cases where additional protection or different layers of protection can come into play, not just your traditional HIPAA-related data for healthcare data in the US or data associated with that. So when we're thinking about these, we also need to think about the users that are handling this type of data. Whenever we're discussing additional layers of data protection, especially in the email world, we typically are involving other technologies that really have a trade-off. And this trade-off is very difficult as IT professionals because it's very easy to introduce technology to protect that most sensitive data. I can just encrypt it. I can just use technologies in my cloud provider to do that. I can use additional layers of technology to do that. But it also must be shared, and that's not easy. And this is usually in direct conflict with that easiness because as security professionals, if we're going to introduce any technology that offers more friction, our users are just simply going to try to work around it or ignore it within that environment. And those are really the choices that we historically have had to make when we're discussing data protection, specifically to email and the content that we're handling. And what this looks like is traditionally is going to be one of three approaches typically associated with that. And all of those really risk either users not adopting it or providing so much friction that it's a support nightmare. And at the end of the day, what that represents is by these red dots on this diagram, that though we have traditional areas that we can use to protect this, they may be either bypassed or cause friction to our recipients of these systems, ultimately leaving us as organizations exposed to the various risks of data, our most sensitive data outside of environment. And that's really where Virtru focuses, our technologies to handle this. We want to get past that data protection is in direct conflict with ease. And how our technology is applied is we want to allow you to easily handle and protection of data when it's being created or when it's being shared within the environment, allowing you to provide end-to-end technology that allows you to protect before it ever gets into your Microsoft ecosystem. If this is your Exchange servers, could be there. This could be your Office 365 environment. And what that gives you is that gives you the full control to say, once this is outside of my environment, that we're gonna easily share that and still maintain control of the information as we have. So really the bottom line and what I want you to think about and leave this with presentation with is Virtru is here to help you protect and control that most sensitive information. And when you think about this protection, we want to ensure that it covers you both inside and outside of your organization, but not really get in the way of the users from an ease of use standpoint. So really there's three tenets. The number one is where this protection happens. We want you to secure this originally at the source. So we're gonna go through a demonstration showing how this works, and we're gonna start in an email client. We're gonna start an Outlook, or we're gonna start an Office 365 web experience. What does it look like to protect that? And how does it look to share and consume that outside of the environment? One important fact in looking at this is that at no time will Virtru ever have access to content, which is a very difficult thing to do and provide an easy to use experience. So we'll step through and see what that looks like. But really what I want you to focus on as IT professionals, as security professionals, as we look at this, is showing you how you never lose control of that data or access to that content. We're going to discuss how we can apply encryption technologies. And so when we're starting to think about encryption technologies, usually the first reaction is, how do I handle the keys? Who can use this? All through that conversation, really, we want to give you a most flexible or versatile option that allows you many options, but it's seamless from the end user perspective. So before we jump into this, what we want to talk about is how this works within the Microsoft ecosystem and environment. So you'll notice the little badge in the bottom right. Virtru has recently been selected. We've been honored with the selection to be part of the Microsoft Accelerator program. This is a yearly activity. We're one of 6 vendors to be added to this. And really, this is an exciting phase for Virtru as a company, because we're really expanding and moving into helping you directly inside of your Office 365 environments. So we're going to show you that here in a second about how we can introduce data protection in the form of encryption, but also describe some of how we have some data loss prevention technologies that allow you to enforce protection, rules, policies, and procedures directly inside of your client environment. But at all times, you as a Virtru customer will always control those encryption keys, who accesses how those are handled. And that becomes really important, because at any time, a sender or an administrator can revoke or expire immediately access to content as we're sharing that. And that's really automatic as we have that. And the important fact, again, focusing on what makes Virtru different, is we implement our technologies so that no third party ever has access to that content. So Virtru, we never have access to decrypt your content in our software as a service. You're always going to handle encryption and decryption directly inside of controlled environments for that. So rather than rather than staying in the abstract in the slides, the best way to understand how Virtru helps and the easiness and the process of this is to step through a quick demonstration. So let's do that together today. As Emily mentioned, we have the question and screen within your GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar screen. Please feel free to ask questions. We're going to take those after we step through a quick demonstration within that environment. So what I'm going to do and what we're going to start together is we're actually going to start within the Virtru Control Center, or our dashboard environment. This is an administrative interface that allows you to understand what data has been protected via Virtru. And this is a very important experience, because you as administrators, for any email that's been protected with Virtru, have the ability to track or understand if messages have been forwarded, if they've been accessed, but most importantly, you have the ability to revoke or reauthorize access to specific content or specific environments. You also, as an administrator, have the abilities to define rules on when automatic protection is required. So if we're dealing with our benefits department that's handling Social Security numbers, or if we happen to handle any PCI data or credit card numbers, how do we want to handle that if they're detected within that environment without ever exposing any of that content to Virtru or Microsoft or any system out there? This could be based off of simple keywords associated with that. If I'm a healthcare organization, they may be specific rule packs associated with specific aspects of healthcare related data, but these rules can really be focused and targeted to any part of my organization and filtered based off of groups of users, based off of organizational units, or any aspect of the email and the scanning there. So practically what that looks like from the end user perspective is I have the ability as an end user to choose to either selectively protect content. So now we're going to jump into a sending experience where I am a sender. and I'm going to send a quick pre-release earnings report to my finance team and one of my external parties. If I would like to selectively choose to protect this, we give the users the option to turn Virtru protection on. And when this happens now, we are generating encryption keys on this client that will provide client-side encryption technology that allows you to protect the bodies and the attachments of the emails. Okay. You also have full control characteristics of this. For instance, if I only want this data set accessible for within the next week, I can choose that this is going to expire on Halloween at 11/17, so 7 days from now, directly in that. Another important technology or feature that we have of this is the ability to disable forwarding, so that only these original recipients are able to view and handle that content as we have it. And then finally, there's this PDF watermarking capability that allows you to protect any of these PDFs such they cannot be downloaded or printed, and also watermarks the recipient's address on that. So these are very easy to use, very quick to set. You don't have to choose those. You can quickly just turn the Virtru encryption on for those specific emails or those content. And what that does is that provides or that sends an encrypted email. I mentioned rules before, so those rules can also be used if a user either forgets to turn Virtru encryption on, or in this case, these are policies and procedures that we want our users to be adhering to. We can also use those to scan and warn users or automatically encrypt based off of the rules that we had set up earlier. So in this case, I've identified a pattern that looks like a social security identifier. This is an area that I can choose to send securely, or I can edit that and totally get rid of that information as we have that. So this is a way for us to force policies and procedures within them. So the sending experience, very seamless. We want to hook that directly into your environment. We started in Outlook since that is the most common environment that our Microsoft customers are using today. But as we move into the Office 365, many of our customers are also transforming and moving more towards the web experience. So this is in the Outlook web experience for Office 365. Here's one of those recipients of that email that has our browser extension installed that allows us to automatically hook into the native Office 365 experience and either read messages. So that was that encrypted message before. It happens very quickly and decrypts directly within line within that web browser experience. But also as you're creating new messages, allows you to either toggle protection on and then have those same control features that we had before. So these are very internally focused within that, but as we focus on Virtru's technology, one of the key differentiators is we also provide this technology outside of your Office 365 environment or your Exchange environment as we have that. And this will come in the form of, I sent this email to a couple of Virtru recipients. One was, again, a recipient, in this case was on a G Suite domain. Again, we'll have browser extensions that will allow us to automatically decrypt within this environment and reply directly in a secure manner and provide that level of protection outside of that environment. But as we look at this and we go through this, we're very focused on, so far, what the seamless experiences we can provide in Virtru clients, okay? But we also want to make this as seamless as possible for your recipients that do not have Virtru installed. So typically when we're dealing with encryption technologies, data is being uploaded to a portal, the user is then jumping into a portal by creating a new password and going through that. Virtru is trying to handle this a bit differently in that instead of jumping the user into a portal experience and going through that, we want to be able to have them use their existing credentials or identity instead of having them remember or create new credentials that then they may forget at a later time, causing you specific support issues. So what these recipients see is, let's go show you the original message real quick, because this is a really important fact about Virtru. So if we go look at our message, I'm going to scroll through quickly. We're not necessarily all IT professionals here, but we have the regular my message headers. But the important thing about this email is there's no clear text in this email. And I can scroll through quickly because there's really nothing to see here, because all of this message is truly protected with encryption, and we're delivering the message. So this message in the inbox is not decryptable without access to that encryption key. Only authorized parties are able to access that encryption key. So what we need to do when we deliver a Virtru encrypted message to a person that does not have any of our clients installed, we'll need to see if they're authorized to go decrypt this message. And this is the email that they'll receive directly within here. So this email is all customizable to you and your organization, because branding is a very important thing. Change management is an important process that we always go through with our customers, and understanding we're communicating in a different manner. Here are the processes that you will go through. Okay. So the logos, the templates, the colors, this message is all customizable by the individual sender. You'll see here is this personalized introduction. This is all can be applied by default or applied to current messages there, because what we're going to ask those users to do is we are going to ask, are you authorized to decrypt this message? And in order for us to understand, are you authorized, we need to know who you are. So what we're going to allow you to do here as a recipient of this message is we're going to allow you to authenticate with your existing cloud provider or your email address that you have. So there's some great technologies that our cloud providers provide us, like an OAuth connection or a SAML connection or an OpenID, that allows us to recognize I'm on a Gmail or I'm on an Office 365 account. I can go use my identity on Google to authenticate myself without ever exposing my password to Virtru or going through that. So for users that do not have those options available, there's this other authentication flow that allows us to send an email back to the recipient and then authenticate via that manner as well. I'm going to choose, since I'm on a Gmail account, to log in with Google directly in this environment. Or actually, I will just go send me an email as we have. So as we send an email back, that we can, so we're going to go verify ourselves with Virtru. And you'll notice it says use Chrome here. And the reason it says use Chrome is we're trying to target you to the specific browser or the specific environment that you choose to click that link from. So in this case, I chose Chrome because I'm logged in into my Chrome session. There we can go verify that user, and that will launch us into the secure reader. So the secure reader is a really important experience for us, because this allows any non-Virtru recipient to decrypt messages, but this is still providing an end-to-end encryption, or in this case, decryption. We've identified that new-to-virtru@gmail.com has been authenticated, and they're authorized to decrypt this message. And now we can handle this directly in here. Any attachment can be viewed in here. And if you remember before, I enabled a PDF watermarking feature that disabled the download of this attachment. So this pre-release earnings report that we had also is watermarked with the recipient's email address. So if this person were to try to take a picture with this phone and leak this out to somebody else, we know the source of this leak or this information. So all of this experience is available directly without installing Virtru in the environment. But we also have the ability to reply securely to this. So we'll pop up a new window that allows us to securely reply. We can add attachments directly to this environment, still providing this all without providing or installing additional technology from those recipient standpoint. So control is a very important aspect. This is always going to be handling in an end-to-end encrypted manner and going through that. But also another consideration with this environment is that you are the sender. If I accidentally had sent this email to one of the parties, or I included the wrong attachment, at no time do you lose control of that message, because you have this great red hand here that allows you to disable access to that content. So you as administrators had that in that earlier dashboard experience, but you as the senders also have that ability to control, to revoke access to the encryption keys, so that immediately any person that tries to access that encrypted content again, or they had that open within their environment, all of those environments will then be revoked, such that even though that message is still sitting in their inbox, this is the true undo button, if you will, because access to those encryption keys is no longer available. So at the end of the day, Virtru here is providing a seamless experience for our end users that will allow us to provide protection technologies and never losing control of that data. So historically, when we're dealing with encryption technologies, there's going to be a sacrifice in user experience, which goes through the adoption phase and really limits the adoption of these technologies. And where Virtru focuses our time is right in the middle of both providing data protection and ease of use for that environment. So now we're going to jump into a question and answer session. So feel free to drop any more questions in there and we'll go through the list that folks have already introduced.
Awesome. Thanks, Brett. Our first question here, how does Virtru DLP scan content without giving Virtru access to it?
That's a great question because as I mentioned earlier, Virtru never has access to the content. And that means our DLP technology is going to be enforced all on our client side products. So as we introduced the Outlook add-in or our extensions directly into Office 365, all of that processing from a data loss prevention standpoint is happening inside of those clients. Additionally, Virtru offers some network data protection technology that allows you to handle full mail traffic or mail flows. So setting up partner connectors in Exchange or Office 365 allows for our network data protection or NTA gateways to also scan that content directly inside of your environment without ever exposing that information, those unencrypted mails, to Virtru.
Okay, I've got another question here. Is the pricing per user?
Yeah, that's a great question because one of the broader questions when you're dealing with data protection technology is how is this licensed? Is this going to be required for my entire domain? And really, that's a conversation that we have as we discuss what are your use cases, who's handling the sensitive data as we go through that. So licensing for us is done by a traditional software as a service model, per user per year associated with that. And then that's all based off of need within your organization. You're not required to license 100% of your domain, depending on your use cases and where you're introducing Virtru protection inside of your environment.
Okay, thanks, Brett. Next question, how does Virtru compare to products like Proofpoint?
Oh, that's a great question. So Proofpoint Technologies is a great one out there, and Proofpoint is email gateway technologies or providing much more above and beyond just encryption. So Proofpoint provides in their stack encryption and data loss prevention, but they'll also provide their attack and threat protection for your environment to protect against some sophisticated attacks as we go through that. So where Virtru is similar is we are indeed a data protection company, but the biggest difference is where and how we're applying our data protection technologies. So we will, at most instances, apply our encryption directly in the clients so that no unauthorized third parties are able to access content. So in this case, rather than sending all your Virtru, all your data to Virtru as you would within Proofpoint, this case you will actually send none of that to Virtru and never give Virtru access to that. So you can enforce all of your policies and procedures, and you can ensure only authorized third parties are able to access that. The big difference also from a recipient standpoint is we're not using a portal. We're not uploading this to an environment outside of our existing systems or existing mail systems. You're using your existing mail systems and IDs to handle that from an access standpoint. So those are really the key differences. Ideally, many cases we have customers that will use both technologies hand in hand, and that is another use case for our network data protection technologies for customers that do use Proofpoint and want to complement their data protection needs.
Great, thanks, Brett. How does Virtru support email archiving and Ediscovery?
That is a different question because there's many different approaches to email archiving and discovery that we'll need to account for. So in some instances, we'll use native tool sets like Office 365 will provide. In other instances, we'll use journaling inboxes. In other instances, we'll use raw SMTP paths, depending on what technology and how it's been implemented. So depending on the requirements, we will apply different approaches or technologies for those. We have actually patented an approach that allows you to keep data encrypted inside of those environments, and then use our encrypted search technologies to search directly within those environments. In other instances, based off of your regulatory requirements, so one I think of immediately is under SEC compliance, customers would like to have those messages decrypted and put into the journal or put into the SMTP flow. So we'll introduce technology that allows for that. So really it's on a case-by-case basis throughout that, and we'll implement either a decryption scenario for those messages if that's your regulatory need, or we'll provide tool sets that allow you to do encrypted searches or exports from those e-discovery environments for your regulatory needs.
Great, thanks. Does Virtru work on mobile?
Virtru does work on mobile. So there's either going to be two experiences. So just as before, when we were receiving an encrypted email, we showed two specific options. We showed if you had installed something, providing a seamless experience to do that. And for mobile, we have apps that will allow you to decrypt on iPhone or Android devices directly in a Virtru app that has either been downloaded by your recipients directly from the app or Play Store, or deployed via mobile device management software. Additionally, if a recipient has not installed one of those apps, you can decrypt using that same secure reader that we stepped through before. That'll work in your Safari and will also work in your Chrome browsers or other mobile browsers that we have there. Encrypted messages can all be generated and directly handled directly from those mobile apps as well that Virtru deploys.
Great, thank you. Can an administrator revoke messages on behalf of their users?
Absolutely. Those encryption keys are owned by your organization. They're not owned by the individual users. So the administrator at any time can revoke access to those encryption keys, and that is a core administrative functionality that we offer. We also have a different administrative roles depending on your requirements for segregation of duty. You may have male administrators that you do not want to grant that capability, but you want to grant compliance individuals the ability to do that. All of that is available within our Virtru platform.
Great. I've got one more question here. Where are keys hosted?
Yeah, so keys are hosted in Virtru Software as a Service. Virtru Software as a Service is hosted in Amazon infrastructure currently. That is all handled in US-based key storage. So US East and US West associated with the physical location of those. We have some customers that also require some specific data residency requirements in going through that. So we also have an additional offering that some of our most sensitive or regulated customers will deploy is a bring your own key offering, if you will. So it's our Virtru customer key server that allows for that same seamless experience, that same end-to-end encryption technology, but it assures that Virtru never sees those encryption key or has access to those keys. All operations will go through your customer key server. So in those environments, the keys storage is really also going to be dependent on how you deploy and where you deploy your systems as well.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brett. While we're waiting for any last questions to come in, I am just going to launch a poll for the group here. If you are interested in having a Virtru expert reach out to you, just you can select the option here and we'll make sure somebody reaches out to you right away. And I'll just leave this on for another moment and we will get back to questions. Okay, I will close the poll here. Thank you. Okay, I do have another question that came in. How do we know if we have 365 or is all Microsoft Office now 365?
Talk to your email administrator. Unfortunately, that is a little bit of a branding thing in addition to actual technology. So at the end of the day, Virtru will provide protection directly within your Outlook environment. So if you're on Outlook 2010 or 2013 or 2016, we can provide protection technology, and that is really independent of the back end. So typically when we're discussing Office 365 branding as far as the environments that you're inside of, a lot of time that's actually going to be related to the back end servers that we have. So our IT administrators have set up an Exchange server that's sitting in our data center, or maybe the Office 365 Exchange server is actually hosted in the cloud. So really that's independent of where the actual work and encryption is happening within this environment. So if you're typically dealing with that Outlook web experience that says Office 365 in it, then you definitely know you're in that environment. Otherwise, you're typically interacting via Outlook, and we'll still cover you whether you're on Exchange or Office 365 from a back end. And that's we're happy to discuss what that would look like. As Emily mentioned, if you'd like to talk to one of our folks, we'd be happy to discuss those further and help you understand what the differences are.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brett. I do have one more quick poll to launch. We'd just love to know what you thought of the presentation today and how relevant this was to your organization. So if you could just take a quick moment to answer that, that would be fantastic. Thank you. And again, if any of you have any questions that are just kind of firing off now in your mind, just feel free to add them to the questions box, and I'll do one last check before we wrap up here. All right, I will share the results back here. It looks like 75% thought this was very relevant, so that is good news, and 25 somewhat relevant. So thank you. I'm just going to hop back to the questions box. Looks like we're all done on the questions front. Thank you so much, Brett, for the presentation, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. We will be sending this recording out to you first thing tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for the time.